Well, good Monday morning. This is Senator Dick Black, retired senator. Um, Today we're going to talk about Joe Biden's Mideast nightmare. He is in a real quandary over what to do and how to handle this politically and militarily. We're joined by our friend Jim Jatras, who is a tremendous foreign policy expert on these things and very current on everything going on in the Middle East. Jim, it's good to have you with us today.
Senator, it's great to be with you again. I always appreciate your invitation.
Well, thank you. Well, we've just had 3 soldiers killed. The administration says they were killed at Tower 22 in Jordan, which is right on the very edge of the border with Syria. And Jordan denies that they were killed there and says that they were killed at Al-Tanf, which is a base that we have in Syria. We've illegally occupied Syria for quite a number of years now, and we've actually established a no-fly zone with no legal authority whatsoever, but we have killed Syrians who have tried to enter their own sovereign territory. I honestly, it's hard for me to sort out, did it actually occur at Tower 22 just over the border, or was it at Al-Tanf, which is nearby? And the operation the U.S. runs at Al-Tanf, which I'm sure this Tower 22 is a part of it, we have this large area that we've mapped out. We won't allow Syrian troops or Syrian aircraft to enter to try to restore control of the area. And there's a large tribal population there that generates recruits for ISIS. And so we protect them. They have these basic trainees that go off, they travel across the desert, and they replenish the ISIS forces that are periodically decimated by the Syrian army. Now, if the U.S. were not at Al-Tanf on the Jordanian border, and if they were not in northern Syria, then ISIS would disappear rather quickly, I think. The Syrian army has defeated them, just inflicted massive defeats on them. And the only thing that protects ISIS today, as near as I can see, is the presence of U.S. forces that provide a shelter. And in return, the continued existence of ISIS gives us a pretext for why we illegally occupy Syria, why we unlawfully occupy Iraq, despite the fact that the Iraqi government says, we want you to get out really quickly from Iraq. And we say, oh, well, we've restored the sovereignty of the people in Iraq but you better do exactly what we tell you to do, or we'll continue bombing like we've been doing for 34 years in Iraq. So could you, Jim, would you just give us your take on what's going on? Because there's a lot of politics and there's a lot of war talk going on right now.
Well, Senator, I think you've really laid the stage out very nicely. I mean, we've got this illegal presence in Al-Tanf, and as you point out, that's just one little part at the southern end of Syria that sort of controls the main road between Syria and Iraq. And of course, it's right there at the juncture with Jordan as well. I don't think we know exactly where this hit occurred, whether it was this Tower 22 or whether Al-Tanf or even in Iraqi territory. In a sense, it really doesn't matter to what happens. As you point out, we also have this other larger presence in Syria, which is in northern Syria and the predominantly Kurdish areas, just like we have a big presence in Iraq, also primarily in the Kurdish areas. Even though the Iraqi government has told us to get the hell out, and we won't. I think that's called an occupation once you do that. And as you point out too, this is sad actually, Senator, because there are an awful lot of people who are conservative, a lot of people supported President Trump, who bought the line that we are there fighting ISIS, and we are not there fighting ISIS. I mean, as you say, that's a pretext for us to stay there, but ISIS would be eliminated if it were not for our presence there, essentially protecting them. Let's also keep in mind that bombing that took place in Iran a couple of weeks ago that ISIS has claimed credit for. Unfortunately, a lot of what we're seeing in this region, Iraq, in Syria, let's not forget about the brewing problem in Yemen, which is also getting worse, is pointing more and more toward getting us embroiled in a direct conflict with Iran. And we have people after this incident demanding that we launch direct strikes on Iran, and essentially get ourselves into a war with a very formidable regional power that nobody, talk about an open-ended adventure where we don't really know how this would turn out. I think that's the direction things are going here. And look, and again, a lot of good-hearted, ordinary Americans will say, well, Americans have been killed. We need to do something about it. We can't take this lying down. We need to avenge them. And, our prestige is on the line. Well, we lost a lot more people at that Marine barracks bombing in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan had the good sense to say, you know what? We don't have a dog in this fight. Let's get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And which is what we should be doing. If we're concerned about the safety of these Americans, we should be saying, why are we risking their life and limb in an adventure where we have no national interest? And in fact, to my mind, are acting not only immorally and illegally, but contrary to our national interests by having these people there and squandering their lives, which is in fact what we're doing. And then we have people in Washington calling for even more death and destruction. That's where we are right now, I believe, Senator.
It's interesting. Of course, you're a tremendous expert on Serbia, but it's a little reminiscent of the assassination of the Archduke, and he and his wife were killed, and everybody started saying, "Well, we've got to avenge this. We've got to get even." And in the end, 20 million people lay dead because we had to get even for 2 people who were killed. So, I don't think anybody seriously imagines that we could get into a serious war with Iran that would not be very, very costly in lives and treasure. It might be sort of the last straw that bankrupts the United States and just tips us over the edge financially. People don't realize how large Iran is relative to these other places that we have invaded. We went into Iraq at a point where Iraq had just exhausted itself in a very bitter war with Iran. Their population was decimated. They had suffered enormously, with great encouragement from the NATO forces, from the United States, from Europe. We were all rah for Iraq while they were fighting Iran, and then we decided, well, heck, we've got another agenda now. Let's. They've been our allies. We gave them poison gas to stop the Iranians during the war there, which they used in large quantities. It's almost a World War I style employment of basic chemical agents, chlorine, phosgene, things like that. And all of a sudden we just decide, well, we think you're our enemy today. So we're going to say you've got weapons of mass destruction because we did provide them to you. And so now we're going to say, look, these guys are monsters because they have poison gas. And they had gotten rid of all the gas that we provided them. And so it's bizarre what goes on. But you've got this political situation where every 4 years, we have a president who is required to start paying real attention to the American people. And here you've got Joe Biden, who has just basically, thumbed his nose at every element of the American population, expressed genuine, I think, almost hatred towards certain racial groups and so forth. And now all of a sudden he's saying, oh, well, I've got real problems here. And we've got this large contingent in the Democratic Party that wants us to withdraw from these engagements.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I ought to start listening. But there was an interesting article in the New York Times that came out on the 28th. And it says there are 1,000 black pastors who have called on Biden to cease, to demand a ceasefire in Gaza. And the subheading on the article said that black congregants' dismay at President Biden's posture on the war could imperil his reelection bid. And a lot of these black pastors are saying, look, especially the young blacks, the college-educated blacks or college students, they've really turned bitterly against the way that Israel is handling things in Gaza, and it's going to be very difficult to get them out to vote for you, President Biden, and so it's created this tension where the Democratic Party gets about half of all of their contributions for the reelection campaign from various pro-Israel billionaires, the mega billionaires that really have a very low regard for Palestine and very devoted to Israel. And so Biden feels like he's got to satisfy them. He's got to seem really mean towards the Palestinians in Gaza Strip. But at the same time, now, Biden has imported a lot of Muslims to the country, and a lot of other presidents have. And now they've become a force to be reckoned with, particularly in Michigan, which is one of the key states that Biden must win. And the Muslim population there is just ferociously angry with him. So it really puts them in a spot.
Well, careful what you wish for. I mean, the Democrats for decades have built their, they used to be the party of the working class, primarily white working people, and then they became more of the party of the welfare class, and now they're the party of the not only some of the big financial figures, but also in the corporate class, but also of racial ethnic strife that they, by dividing the population based this way. So they've got right now very acutely a kind of a Jewish problem and a black problem within their own party, whereas they've got a lot of Jewish donors, most of whom are very pro-Israel, but not all of them, because you have a lot of young Jews who are very, very woke, and they don't care about Israel that much. I mean, their belief system is more centered around, abortion rights and LGBT and all that kind of stuff, where they're actually allied then with this kind of, Afro-Asiatic Islamic force growing within the Democratic Party, the squad type people. So they've got a little civil war going on within their own party. The Republicans, on the other hand, still demographically tend more to support, you might call the legacy American ethnos, white, Christian, English speaking, and all that stuff, which is why people like Joy Reid are calling Iowa unrepresentative of America and voting for Trump because it's full of white Christians. Oh, how evil, you know. But
Full
anyway,
of Americans. What
yeah,
can you
real
do?
Americans.
We've
Right,
got
full of people who
Americans
founded the
involved.
country. Oh my, how horrible can you get? But here's the thing: is that it also makes for some very messy politics here, because this is an ideal opportunity for Republicans, and they're already doing it, to play chief warmonger, cheap warmonger, by attacking Biden and saying, see, it's because you're not militant enough. You're not supporting Israel enough. You're not bombing Iran. We need to bomb Iran. And that's something, of course, that their evangelical Christian base, which tends to be very dispensationalist, very pro-Israel, is going to cheer on. So you have Republicans scoring cheap political points by egging Biden toward more militant action in the Middle East, perhaps in the hope that he will get embroiled in another war there and create a terrible mess, and they can point the finger at him and say, aha, see, look what Biden did. Look at the horrible situation in the Middle East, and look all these Americans being killed because he was not strong enough. He didn't stand tall for America. These colors don't run. You know, it's such a I hate to say it's such a god-awful mess on both sides with both of these very dysfunctional parties. But I don't see any good exit from this thing.
Well, it is interesting. You mentioned the Republican side. Now we've got Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and he is calling for serious crippling costs to Iran, and not for attacking their terrorist proxies, but going after the Iranian sponsors themselves. Mm-hmm. Lindsey Graham is saying we need to strike targets inside Iran. Tom Cotton, who is there's no war he doesn't love, no defense contractor who's not on his speed dial system, and he chimed in. He said the only answer to these attacks must be devastating military retaliation against Iran's terrorist forces, both in Iran and across the Middle East. Anything less will confirm Joe Biden as a coward, unworthy of being commander-in-chief. Well, it is interesting that and all three of these guys, and there are certainly a number of other ones too, but they have been very involved in trying to promote war with Iran for a long time, mm-hmm. and that's simply one of those things that has been a part of the deep state. Is one of the many Middle Eastern countries that we want to take down is Iran. But if ever there was something that promised to become another Vietnam quagmire, and I don't, I was wounded fighting in Vietnam. My radio men died right beside me. We were trying to rescue a surrounded outpost, and so I have immense love and respect for everybody who fought there. We fought for a good cause, but we never should have been there. We didn't have to go there. So I think we were in the right in what we were doing. The North Vietnamese were monsters, but we never should have been there in the first place. And so we got involved in the quagmire there. 60,000 Americans died. You look at Iran, the topography of Iran is very, very rugged, very mountainous. If the people of Iran got fired up that they wanted to seriously resist us, we could end up being there for 20, 30, 40 years, bleeding treasure, bleeding lives. And I think increasingly with all of the drones and everything, mm-hmm. We seem to be reverting. We went you look at the course of warfare, you go from the First World War, where it was an infantry, trench warfare, just a slaughterhouse on the lines. And then we went to this mobile warfare with the Germans, with the Blitzkrieg and very rapid mobility. And over time, we have now reverted back to where the armor that was so dominant in the Second World War is now vulnerable, and we're headed back to the infantry dominant situation. I don't know that military people have quite assessed it that way, but I think that's where we're headed. And when you talk about infantry, you talk about bloodshed, you talk about casualties. And up until now, we've had our M1 tanks, and we could stand off, and the Iraqis could come out with their 45 pistols and shoot at the tanks, and the tanks would stand off 1.5 miles away, and with their laser guided sights and all, they could just put a shell right in the chest of the guy who was shooting the pistol off in the distance. Well, we're not likely to encounter that type of disparity in force again. And we could end up being surprised if we throw military forces into Iran. I'm not saying we're thinking about that. We're thinking about sort of the Israeli approach, which is you go and you bomb people who are not able to shoot back, and you just kill them at will. But I think, of course, we risk the fact that sooner or later they're going to start bringing down planes and that kind of thing.
I think we're just beginning to digest the kind of revolution in military technology that has occurred over the last few years. I would say even really starting with the Armenia-Azerbaijan war of a few years ago, but really accelerated now during this war in Ukraine, where you're right, the kind of mobility of tanks and planes and, God forbid, aircraft carriers is just yesterday's news. That with geolocation and drones and everything else, that virtually all of these things are targets now. And look, we've got bases all over the Middle East that the Iranians can hit with their missiles. We've got aircraft carriers not only around the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, but also, let's not forget, the Red Sea. I mean, I saw a report that a lot of I'm trying to think which kind of planes that we have based in the Middle East were sent into the air not long after this incident took place, because I think there was some fear that they would be then targeted on the ground if this thing escalated quickly. They had to get them up in the air and out of the region quickly before they could be targeted. And so if we were to go in against the Iranians and start striking them, even with cruise missiles and things like that, they're going to shoot back. And I think we have some very vulnerable targets in the region. And that's not even adding, for example, to what's going to happen then in northern Israel with Hezbollah, and whether those other groups that are allied with Iran that so far have been holding back, and we've only been seeing like a slow burn confrontation with the Israelis, that would escalate quickly as well. So there's so much into the unknown in terms of how destructive this war could be if this gets started. And like I say, it's I don't know whether Biden or whatever passes for that mummy in the White House now, who's really pulling the strings that make his mouth work. But I don't know whether he's looking at this as, well, my best chance at reelection is as a wartime president, so let's get on with it, or whether they're trying to find some way out of this. But certainly their Republican opponents seem quite keen to goad him into doing something really stupid. So this is, like I said, Senator, this is not looking good.
Yeah. I know that in the past, that Democrat presidents have sometimes used war as a way of mobilizing the country behind them. We saw this certainly with Bill Clinton, where he was on the eve of his impeachment trial in the Senate, and he and Hillary had watched the movie Wag the Dog, and it was a tale of, I guess, of somebody who waged a war in order to take attention off and succeeded, and that's exactly what Clinton did, because I think up until then we had decided, no, that we're staying out of this, and then just overnight we said, okay, we're going to get in, we're going to bomb the heck out of Serbia. We're going to go in on the side of the radical Muslims who are slaughtering Serbians in Kosovo, and then we proceeded to bomb until there were no military targets left, and so then we began bombing passenger trains. We bombed the Chinese mission. We bombed a major bridge intersection at the busiest time when traffic was flowing over, just killing innocent Serb civilians wherever we could, just so that we could continue to show that we had some momentum and keep up interest in the war.
Yeah, that's right. And that was under circumstances where the technology and the politics were such that we could pretty much do what we wanted. The Russians were weak. The Serbs really had no strategic ability to shoot back or the weapons to shoot back, and so forth. But that's not the case now. And I think so many of the people who are making these decisions are still stuck in they're ready to win the Battle of Midway all over again, So it's they still have this notion of this American absolute supremacy when it comes to not only the Russians and the Chinese, but even countries like Iran, and that just ain't so. And I don't want to see. And by the way, let's add to that a discussion we had on a previous program is who's going to serve in this American military to go do all this stuff. Here's a regime that's been telling the core American ethnos for decades, we hate you. You are bad people. We don't want you around. And oh, by the way, now come and die for us. Well, I think a lot of regular Americans, especially in the Midwest and the South and places like that, are saying, well, hell no, it's your army now. It's your war. You go fight it. Go, get your foreigners and your trannies and your women out there to go fight your wars. Well, how's that likely to turn out? So, there are a lot of things. We're at a confluence of a lot of things having to do with politics, technology, demography, ideology. None of which are very, let's say, positive economically, financially, are not positive indicators for the way things are going in this country. Let's not even talk about the situation down at the border and Texas resisting the federal government with the support of 25 other governors. There's a lot coming together here that does not point to a rosy scenario on any front.
Well, I think it's certainly not a rosy scenario for the Biden administration.
No, it's not.
I don't think they can possibly gain by attacking Iran. If they ended up doing it, I could see some sort of pro forma things where they can say, oh, well, we did this or that. But I don't envision a serious attack on Iran. I think they're just in such a pinch now where this is not the wag the dog scenario, because Americans are very cynical of all of these military ventures. We started the war in Ukraine. Of course, we forced the Russians into coming across the border. But we had planned on that all along. We intended it. This was Obama's folly. He staged a coup that overthrew the legitimate elected government of Ukraine, poured in weapons, built up a huge army to go to war with Russia, and and eventually we forced them to do just that. And of course, you know, the news media always plays along with wars, and the next thing American people are saying, oh yeah, man, they've crossed a border. What a crime that is. As though the United States, I mean, when has there been a year that we didn't invade somebody's sovereign borders? I don't know until you go back to, I don't know. I mean, we're just always doing it. So
yeah. Well, you know, if you're talking about a demonstrative strike, I mean, remember the two occasions when Trump struck Syria over those two phony claims of chemical weapons use. And I think there's reason to believe that those two strikes were both calculated not to inflict a lot of damage, just so they could say, okay, see, we did something, and now let's calm everything down. I don't know, maybe the Biden administration would try to do that, or whether the Iranians would play along with that, or whether they would respond with something serious on their side. In any case, again, we'd get the accusations from the Republicans that they were wimping out if that's all that they did. Yes, what their next move is going to be, because Biden has said that we will respond to this, and what those targets will be, and whether they will be shooting with real bullets, so to speak, or whether it'll be just pro forma. I don't think we really know at this point.
No, and I'm not sure that the Biden administration has it all sorted out, because it is a real dilemma. It's not one of these things where this is part of their agenda that they want to carry out. They're very much in a reactive mode at this point, and being hammered by political pressures from every side. So it is truly a nightmare for Joe Biden and company. It's a no-win situation. Americans are so fed up and so exhausted with the wars. We can't man the ships and the divisions, and as you say, the chickens are coming home to roost. The Biden administration has we hate white people.
Yeah.
We despise you. Now come and join us, and we'll put you as part of these special operations forces, which tend to be mostly white, and we'll send you out and you do the fighting while everybody else sits back. And become the paradigm is we can send this big logistical force in somewhere, and then the real fighting is done often with these special operators staging raids and ambushes and things very heroically. But we've just created this division. It used to be, I fought in Vietnam. We didn't have many blacks. I can't recall in most of the companies. This was in the Marine Corps, but we had a lot of Mexican Americans, and I fought side by side with a lot of Mexican Americans. They were really, really good troops, very, very courageous, but we were unified. I mean, we were united as a country then, and the Democratic Party has made it part of their fundamental philosophy to engender racial hatred among the various factions in the country, using critical race theory as their model. You have oppressors and you have oppressed, and if you're the oppressed, then you are entitled to do whatever you want to the oppressors. You can walk around with a chip on your shoulder, and just the slightest little inconvenience, you can haul off. And some woman walks past you in the subway, and she averts her eyes because she doesn't want to look at a strange man in an isolated place. Well, if you're if you're black, then you feel offended. You got the chip on your shoulder. You run over, you beat her, you kick her until she is on the verge of death.
Mm-hmm.
You're entitled to it. And you're taught in public schools that, hey, this woman's an oppressor. We don't have any sympathy for the
Karen, yeah.
woman who's laying there bleeding and gasping for air. All we care about is race.
Yeah.
So it's it will destroy the country if we don't stop it forcefully. So, well, listen, Jim, I appreciate you being here. I don't know that we have come up with the answers, but I think hopefully we've helped our listeners to get a good grip on some of the challenges and some of the thought processes that we're faced.
Well, I think we can all rest easy at the end, knowing that our fearless leader, who really calls the shots in Washington, Prime Minister Netanyahu, will make the right decision, and that his minions in Washington will do what's best for, well, not the American people, but they'll do what's best. We can be confident of that.
Yes, Netanyahu is certainly calling the shots for the United States these days.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we'll wrap it up with that.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here, Jim, and we appreciate our listeners. We will be back next Monday, and who knows what the news will hold, but it'll be something big, I'm sure.